Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Chatting with the Rev. I'm the Rev that we're talking about this afternoon, Reverend G.W. Scott, Gerald William Scott. And we're glad to have you with us today on this Friday, January the 13th, 2017. Good afternoon, Brother Jeffrey. We're going to be discussing some very serious topics. Well, actually, one particular topic, and that is a letter that ADAPT wrote to President-elect Donald Trump. And we're going to read from that letter. We're also going to analyze some of the important contents of that letter. And we're going to really explain some things and get some things straight. We just have about a week now. Only a week, exactly a week, in fact, before President-elect Donald J. Trump becomes the 45th president of the United States of America on next Friday, January the 20th at 12 noon. So we have exactly a week before he becomes president, and President Obama goes by way of the former presidents George H.W. Bush, actually starting with Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and of course now Barack Obama. So we're going to talk a little bit about both issues, and we're going to delve into with great enthusiasm and with great insight on what's going to happen in the days and years ahead, and how we as Americans generally, and we who have physical disabilities, mental disabilities, and developmental disabilities have to look forward to in this future. So everyone is going to be impacted. Let me tell you that. We've heard from Donald Trump, we've heard from some of his appointees or proposed nominees right now for the office of Secretary of State, Secretary of State, and also Secretary of Human Development. And we've already heard some of the comments they've made, the positions that they've taken in the past, and even their vision for the future. And we have to, good afternoon, Pat. And we have to take a close look at the Attorney General, the one who's being proposed to be Attorney General, Senator Sessions. These individuals are being scrutinized right now on Capitol Hill by the senators that were elected by you and I this past year, and the others as well. So we're going to just begin right now with preceding our letter reading with just the observation of the farewell address given to us by President Barack Obama, our 44th president of the United States, on Tuesday evening. I saw the whole program and I heard his entire speech, and it was a very inspirational, very enlightening, a very good speech, at times even emotional, with his observance of his wife and his children and acknowledging Vice President Joe Biden. But the main theme of his whole position was primarily that we need to, as citizens of this nation, hello Donna, Hickman Temple, God bless you, we as a nation need to unify and be joined together as one, as we face the unknown, really. We're talking about someone who's never held political office. We've heard his rhetoric throughout the election season, even post-election season, and there is room for pause. There is room for concern about the future of this country, in particular those who are considered disenfranchised in this system, those who are still on the outskirts of the power brokers of this system. There's some concern, some real serious concern. So our president has told us as we move into the future that we need to acknowledge the fact that we need to be mindful and insightful and vigilant in all that we do and see and observe and act upon. And he tells us that we need to unite against any and every threat to the liberties and the rights of every American. Hi, Terrell. We need to unite against any attempt to violate and threaten the liberties that have been fought for so long. And then he went on to say that everybody needs to be defended. Everybody needs to be protected, irregardless of race, irregardless of ethnicity, irregardless of sex, irregardless of sexual persuasion. Everyone needs to be defended. Everyone needs to be protected so that no one is violated. And I thought that was a powerful, powerful message. But as always, because I am physically challenged, I listen to the inclusion of our people that have physical, developmental, and mental challenges. I listen with a mindful ear to see what is going to be done or what needs to be said about those who have physical challenges and other disabilities. And once again, no mention was uttered by our president in this fine address, in this fine speech that he gave on Tuesday evening. Love you too. On this Tuesday evening, as he closes his 8-year term in office, he mentions everybody in the struggle of virtually every citizen of this country. He even included people from Western Europe and Eastern Europe, mentioning the Irish and the Polish as they came over and the struggles they had. But yet, again, no mention of protection, no mention, and someone said it was an oversight, but you can't, I find it difficult to believe that when every group is mentioned, not just once, not just twice, but a few times. But in that 50-minute message, no mention, except one little footnote mentioning when he said that he was very overcome, he was moved, to be exact, when he saw a wounded warrior walk. But no real mention of people with disabilities. And he's not the only person. We've talked about it before. Most political speeches, even the most important political speeches, omit people with disabilities. During the campaign of 2016, very little was said about the concerns and issues that directly affect people with disabilities. Good afternoon, Monet. It's as if really people with disabilities, their lives don't matter at all. So though I applaud his speech generally, overall, if you will, but yet nevertheless, I'm waiting for someone to step up and include in the list of groups, people with disabilities in that number. I'm waiting for someone to step up and include the 60 million Americans to have disabilities. We're the largest minority group of them all, but we're very seldom mentioned, and if we are, we're mentioned as a footnote or as a passing thought or in terms of a marginalized way. Good afternoon, my wife, Teresa. Come on, America, wake up. Some of the greatest citizens we've had in this country, some of the greatest citizens we've had in history, have been challenged physically, developmentally, and even mentally. But we still are excluded in the discussion. The discussion of the future of America, the discussion of the future of Americans, which we are certainly a part of. I was born in the United States, and many millions of people, as I just told you, 60 million people in this country, 1 billion people around the world have disabilities. They're born or have had disabilities thrust upon them for one reason or another, through disease, through accident. But here we are, 2017. We consider ourselves the most enlightened, the most inclusive age in history. But we still ignore and still do not press the point of issues that directly impact people with disabilities. Now, the Obama era is about over. We have about a week yet to go. And I want to begin to read a letter to you. In fact, I'm going to conclude it as well. But we're going to really talk about this letter that was sent by a national organization of disability advocates and activists called ADAPT. And they sent Donald J. Trump, Sr., a letter as president-elect. And I'm going to read it to you so there won't be no room for misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what the letter says. This is their open letter to the president-elect, Donald J. Trump. President-elect Trump, the disability community is a diverse community made up of people from different races, faiths, political beliefs, and backgrounds. Our community is the only inevitable minority. If a person lives long enough, they will eventually become disabled. And that is so true. In one way or another, your abilities are lessened as you grow older. So it's an inevitable minority. Therefore, our interests are not partisan, but human. Not political, but practical. We want all people with disabilities to enjoy the rights and opportunities that make America great and to have better, brighter futures for ourselves and our families. It is our hope that under your presidency, the disability community will partake in a more equal share of the prosperity and freedom that is the promise of America. Accordingly, we ask for your support for some critical and important policies which affect our community and daily lives. And before I begin to read some of these proposals and policies, I want to say that some of these include people whether you're disabled or able-bodied. The first, protect our freedom and liberty. The Constitution, in 2 places, guarantees that Americans have the right to live in freedom, but disabled Americans have never enjoyed that constitutionally protected right, because in many states and for many years, the services that disabled people rely on are only available in institutions. I know a lot of people with physical challenges that need wheelchairs, that need assistive devices. But unless they're in an institution, there's no guarantee that if they're in the mainstream of society, that they'll ever be able to have those assistive devices that enable them to do more than what they can do normally. Continuing on. This institutional bias has prevented people with disabilities from participating in the social, economic, and cultural life of our great nation. The institutional bias has been enshrined in law from the beginning of Medicaid, and private insurers have followed suit, even though the cost to provide services to people with disabilities in the community is far less than the cost to provide for these services in an institution. Our community has advocated before presidents and congressional leaders of both parties for decades. We have called on Republicans and Democrats to overturn the institutional bias and secure our constitutional right to live in freedom. We have found allies on both sides of the aisle to support initiatives and legislation which do this. Most recently, in a form of Disability Integration Act, which was introduced by Representative Gibson from New York, a Republican from New York, and co-sponsored by Representatives Steinbrenner, Republican from Wisconsin, in the House this past year. You can be the president who secures for our community the constitutional right to live in freedom by calling on Congress to pass the Disability Integration Act. And that is an act that will allow people who have been previously institutionalized or who will only receive benefits if they go into an institution to receive those privileges here in the general population of our society. Continuing on. Even without the support of Congress, as president, you can still use the power of the Department of Justice to enforce our right to community integration as affirmed by the Supreme Court's decision of Armstead decision, so that disabled Americans are no longer denied their birthright to freedom. We are citizens. We have a right to the freedoms that every American should enjoy. Some do, some don't. But life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness should be bestowed upon every American, regardless of race, creed, ethnicity, nationality, sexual persuasion, or disability. The next point, protect our lives. At present, there are efforts to legalize physician-assisted suicide. Now I want to just define what that really means. The term assisted physician suicide involves a doctor knowingly and intentionally providing a person with the knowledge or means of both acquired to commit suicide, including counseling about lethal doses of drugs and prescribing such lethal doses or supplying the drugs. Good afternoon, Stephanie. That's what physician-assisted suicide is all about. ADAPT, which I'm a member of the Philadelphia chapter, we're against such devices, if you will, such methods. Physician-assisted suicide. We're against that. When a doctor knowingly and intentionally prescribes and even gives a patient who they consider terminal and unretrievable, if you will, something that will assist them in their suicide, or their death, in other words, we're against that. We've seen too many cases of people that have been chalked off as being hopeless, with having a life that cannot be retrieved, a life that cannot be changed, a life that cannot be improved, and for one reason or another, And I believe it's because of the grace of God, and because it really was something that was not meant for them to have to endure. They have been spared death and even recover fully. So ADAPT has said we're against that, and I agree with that. I agree with anything that I don't believe in murder of any kind. That's my own personal belief. I don't believe in suicide. I don't believe in legalized physician-assisted suicide. I don't believe in infanticide, which is killing a child that you feel may not be physically or developmentally or mentally fit. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in euthanasia, mercy killing. I don't believe generally in abortion, except for extreme situations and extreme cases. And I don't believe in capital punishment. This is my own personal belief. I believe murder is murder. I don't even believe in murder when it comes to engaging in war, except if it's justified. And what I mean by justified war, a war against some power that's trying to imprison or trying to work a genocide or extermination of a people and trying to possess their land and their property and their possession. Unjustified war is when you go to war because you want the oil that that country has, or because of greed and tyranny, and you're trying to exterminate people. That's unjustified. The genocide of a group of people. So you declare war against the people. That's unjustified. I think it was justified to go to war against Nazi Germany. They were trying to conquer the world. They were trying to exterminate every Jewish person in the world. Yes, that's justified. But some of these other little skirmishes that we've been involved in have not always been justified. There's wars going on right now that are not justified. They're religious wars and they're territorial wars and they're tribal wars and ethnic wars and religious wars. Because you're not a Christian, or because you're not a Muslim, or because you're not a Buddhist, or whatever the case may be. We're going to declare war. We're going to persecute you. We're going to prosecute you. We're going to behead you. We're going to murder you. We're going to do all kinds of atrocities towards you. Even go to war, if need be, against your nation because of it. I believe that's unjustified. Good afternoon, Karen. That's unjustified. So let's return back to what it's saying here. The disability community, ADAPT is writing to, for those who just joined us, we're reading from an open letter sent to President-elect Donald J. Trump by ADAPT, which is a national organization of activists for disability rights. The disability community is strongly opposed to the policy change which will open the door for people with disabilities that have their lives ended by mistaken coercion or abuse. We are glad to have found strong allies in the Republicans who oppose assisted suicide and for the inclusion of that opposition in the 2016 Republican Party platform. We are counting on you as president to refuse to sign any legislation making assisted suicide legal, to refuse to appoint to the Supreme Court justices who support legalizing assisted suicide, and to ensure that our nation's commitment to suicide prevention includes old, ill, and disabled people. Next point. Assure access to vital health care services. You have called for repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act and for reforming Medicaid. Whatever form that repeal, replacement, and reform may take, the disability community strongly urges you to consider that many of our lives literally depend on services provided and paid for through Medicaid, and may I add, Medicare, and even benefits that come through the Affordable Care Act. Protecting these services for people with disabilities is critical to ensuring that America does not let our elderly and disabled citizens suffer and die of neglect. The ACA, or the American Affordable Care Act, established new health care protections. And let's be clear about something. Let's be clear about something. The Affordable Care Act has been called the Obamacare, but it's the same basic health care program. The ACA established new health care protections. It encourages disabled people to work and utilize private insurance by ensuring that people with pre-existing conditions can receive health care coverage like every other hard-working American. The ACA also established critically important services for disabled Americans, including the Community First Choice option. These provisions must be maintained. We strongly urge you to avoid using block grants for Medicaid. Now, right now, the government has matching funds. They match funds with the state to provide certain services to those who are elderly and those who have disabilities. What's being proposed, or at least suggested, that it may be proposed, that there be a block grant given to Medicaid. What that means is you get X amount of dollars for your particular state, and that's all you're going to get. There's no matching fund. So if a state pays $1 million for a program that's dealing with health care through Medicaid, there will be no matching funds. They're going to get a block grant. They get X amount of dollars from the federal government, and however the state uses it, that's all they're going to get. That's how we are doing it through the matching fund is one thing. Good afternoon, Lisa. Matching fund is one thing. They're proposing block grant funding for Medicaid. The use of Medicaid block grants will further disrupt the services and supports which people with disabilities rely on, with the result that a disabled person's ability to exercise their constitutionally guaranteed right to liberty is dependent not on the Constitution, but rather on their state of residence and that state's implementation of Medicaid. Our liberty is a fundamental right. It must not and cannot be left to the states to decide whether to support the constitutional rights of disabled people. There are 50 states with 50 legislative bodies that can determine 50 different ways to service people with disabilities. None of us are able to go to a state that's more liberal-minded, a state that's more open-minded about assisting people with disabilities. There has to be uniformity. Not rely on 50 different states with 50 different governors and 50 different legislative bodies to determine individually how their particular state is going to deal with people with disabilities. I think there should be more uniformity and not less. God bless you, Carrie. She said yes. We have to look after those who have physical challenges. We know by statistics that for the most part, people with disabilities are the most impoverished group of all. Already. I mean, when I was coming along during the 1990s, I had to retire from pastoring because I could not get affordable health care with my pre-existing condition. I was born with cerebral palsy. I had a fused hip. I had a heart condition. I had asthma. These are all pre-existing 1990s. And so you had to get health insurance, but the cost was so astronomical that the church that I was assigned to could not afford to provide health care for me. Forced me to retire from ministry at the age of 40. Not because I couldn't do it, but because I needed health care. There were issues that I had with my body that I needed to have dealt with, but I couldn't do it on my own. I didn't make that kind of money. You know, if a church can't afford health care, they certainly can't give you a salary that could allow you to go to the hospital and have physical therapy and have operations and whatever else you may need to improve your physical condition. We have to assure that even if this Affordable Care Act is repealed or at least altered in some way, that certain things must be continually be guaranteed. And one of them is that you should not be penalized for pre-existing conditions. Your rates should not go up astronomically because you have a condition that you were born with, or you've had for years and years and years. That should not be a criteria to your receiving affordable health care. So whatever is done with what we call Obamacare, whatever is done with Obamacare, we have to keep in mind that we have to keep things equitable with the people, affordable for the people, accessible to the people. Those who need health care the most, my goodness, a person with a disability, both visible and invisible, they need health care more than anybody else. And yet this is going to impact us more than any other group in America, bar any. Because our whole lives are dependent upon adequate and decent and professional health care. Medicines that we need on a constant basis that are really astronomical if we have to take it out of our pockets. Need to be affordable so we can continue to live and be vital members of this society. And we are vital members. We are important members of this society. Have always been. Have not always been recognized, but it's always been the truth of the matter. Continuing on with the letter. The next portion, eliminate discriminatory ableist standards in federal labor law. Mr. President, many in the disability community have been denied the right to receive a fair wage for our work because an exemption to federal law allows certain organizations to pay people with disabilities less than the federal minimum wage. We've talked about this at great length in other of our series. Talked about it in terms of goodwill, how they pay really pennies, penance, not even a salary, a stipend, a God bless you kind of wage, if you want to put it like that. And that's because of the federal law called the Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act, enacted during the presidency, ironically, of the president who had polio. It was enacted in 1938 under Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration. That there can be exceptions to the rule, hello Arthur, to how you pay people with disabilities. The Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act authorizes employers, after receiving a certificate from the Work, Wage, and Hour Division, to pay sub-minimal wages less than the federal minimum wage to workers who have disabilities for the work being performed. And yes, there's exceptions to the rule and there's conditions to the rule, but it's all up to the employer rather. It's all up to the employer to define what that worker's abilities are and how much their disability impacts their disability. Under the ADA, the American Disability Act, you're supposed to accommodate people's disability to a certain extent. You're supposed to make it on a fair playing field. When you employ a disabled person, you're supposed to make it a fair playing field. Whatever that means. Doesn't mean to go into hock, but you can do some things that make it more feasible and less likely for the disabled person to fail on their job if you do certain things, make certain adjustments. There's nothing wrong with that. It should be done. Instead, many employers would rather find ways, loopholes out of paying their people what they deserve to have. I know you got to be careful because you can't make but so much money. They'll kick you off of certain programs and other things of that nature. But it's a shame how we can really do such dastardly things toward people who are physically, mentally, and developmentally challenged. We always talk about fairness and equality and equity and all of this and justice and all of that, and we treat our disabled people in this country, which I'm a part of, like second-class citizens in every area. Presidents don't mention us. Politicians don't even word with us. We got a little bit of handout here, a little handout there. We can get on a bus. Yeah, they got ramps for buses now. But the attitudes of some of the drivers, the attitudes of the passengers, sometimes they don't even stop and let you on the bus. Act like they don't see you, and yet you're waving. And one time I was in the city of Philadelphia, and a gentleman was waving, was able-bodied. He was waving for me. I was waving, he was waving. 4 buses passed because they didn't want to be bothered. Yeah, they got a ramp. Yeah, they can accommodate you. But like I said the other day, you can legislate things easier than you can change people's mind about it. Legislation is a matter of writing something down, taking your pen and signing a law, something in the law. But changing people's attitude is a much more difficult task. And why should it be? I don't know. Why should it be? I don't know. Begrudging someone because they want to get out of their house, begrudging someone because they want to be a part of the community, begrudging someone because they want to go to a museum or a movie or a restaurant or some other building. Some buildings that are even government buildings, it's hard to get into. I know I go to a building that's government owned and government serviced. And the doors are supposed to be automatic doors to be open, and they're always broken. Unless somebody's there for you, because they're supposed to be those kind of doors, they're hard to push. They're automatic doors. So I can't push a door like that. They're just too heavy to push open because they can't work. So now you got to wait for somebody to come and help you into the building. And most time they come with an attitude or some kind of kind of way. What is wrong with this world? And what's wrong with this nation? It don't surprise me that we're not mentioned when you talk about this person and that person and justice and equality for this group and that group, that we're not mentioned. Because really, to be honest with you, like I said before, I'm going to say it again, disabled lives really don't matter at all. And if they do, they matter very slightly. We don't mind pushing you out for some show, showing you how liberal-minded, how much empathy and sympathy and pity you have for someone who's disabled, but really, to move on it and act on it and do things to provide services so that people with disabilities can have an equal share in the American dream. Not often demonstrated. Let's continue on, and then we'll be through with this portion of our program, which is really just reading the letter today. The next part: protect the rights of Americans with disabilities. In the 26 years since the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, there have been multiple attempts to repeal or restrict the equality which the ADA ensures for our community. Robert says we need to rise and make ourselves known. We need to be seen and shine and show our abilities. Yes, we do. We're too docile, to be honest with you. I'm departing from the letter for a minute. We're too docile. We're too complacent. We're too, I don't know what it is about. We're just too nice. We don't force the matter enough. We're almost apologetic for whatever we ask for. We go to the government and other authorities, even to other groups that are obviously trying to omit us and exclude us. We go with our hats in our hand, as though we're almost begging or trying to reach out in a sense that's very humbling. Sometimes you have to be bold with yourself. You have to call it like it is. You have to stand for something, or nothing will ever be done on your behalf. A squeaky wheel is the one that gets the oil. It's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. Sometimes you got to squeak a little bit. You got to stand up a little bit. The ADA would not have happened if it was not for the squeaky wheels. But then once we move on with one thing, we got to keep on moving. Sometimes, and I'll tell you the truth, in doing the civil rights movement, I got to say this about the civil rights movement. It's something that you can really learn from. We all can learn from it. Because the civil rights movement did one thing. They started off with the bus boycott. Then they moved toward integrating traditionally white schools. Then they moved toward integrating restaurants and diners and things like that. They went on and on and on. Every victory, some other to win. They didn't become satisfied with the one victory. We have the ADA, but there's a lot of injustice still being perpetrated against people with disabilities, even now. Still, in most cities. It's hard to find affordable, accessible housing. It's hard to find affordable, accessible housing. Those would have extra mountains, would be, would open up the doors and make things available to people with disabilities. It's still hard because mentality is they should be in institutions. Why aren't they there? Why should we have to do this? Why should we have to do that? Most churches, synagogues, other religious buildings are not accessible to people with disabilities. And when I say accessible, I don't mean build a ramp. I mean have a deaf interpreter. Have literature for those who can only read Braille and use Braille. Have someone there that can take your child who has autism or some other mental condition or even developmental condition and teach them about the Word, or teach them about God, or teach them about living a fruitful and purposeful life in an environment that they can understand, in a setting that they can be comfortable with. That's what I mean by inclusion. Not just the physically challenged, or some churches I know are established to serve the deaf community. No. That's the problem we have. There's too much you over here and I'm over here. Until we all can get together and stand together, society sees us all as the same. They paint us with one brushstroke. If you're blind, you're disabled. If you're deaf, you're disabled. If you're short in stature, you're disabled. If you're in a wheelchair, you're disabled. If you have MS, MD, lupus, you're disabled. If you have epilepsy, you're disabled. If they know you have a physical challenge or a developmental challenge or a mental challenge, you're classified as being disabled. We're the only one that makes distinctions. Well, I'm only going to support the United Cerebral Palsy. I'm going to only support the deaf community, the deaf culture. I'm going to only support the blind society. I'm going to only support the little people's organization or this organization. Or I'm going to only support the MS organizations and associations. And we stay divided and we stay over here and over there. And that's why division will never build a house. A house divided against itself will fall. And no matter what ADA or any other kind of legislation is established, until we get together and make sure these things are enforced, until we get together and put to the cold people that are trying to deny us our rights, it'll never be as we would have it to be and as it should be. Let me continue on, because I'm getting preachy here, but let me continue on. Going on with under the protection in 26 years since the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, there have been multiple attempts to repeal, restrict, and really demolish some of the programs that have been established. One of those attempts is likely to return to the Congress this Congress term under the name ADA Education and Reform Act. This is in jeopardy. Listen to me. That bill obstructs the protections afforded disabled people under the ADA by imposing additional notice requirements. It is more than a quarter of a century since the ADA was passed. Our community believes that 26 years is more than enough notice for businesses to be made accessible. They want it to be extended. They want more time. Costs too much. Not enough services. Not enough people avail themselves of our services. I know pastors in churches say, well, we're not going to invest in making our churches accessible because there's not enough disabled people that make themselves available to come to church. They don't come to church. So because they don't come, we're not going to make it accessible. It's too much of an expense. And I said, that's really kind of convoluted thinking. Because the reason why they don't come is because it's not accessible. So you say that you would have them come if they could come, but you're not going to make it accessible for them to come. It's too expensive. It's not enough interest in the disabled community to do this and do that. Businesses say, I don't have enough people to come in here that are disabled for us to invest in making our buildings accessible to the disabled. It's kind of logic. The reason why they don't come in is because they can't get in. Well, if they can get in, there's nobody that can serve them. If I'm deaf, there's no interpreter there. If I'm blind, there's nobody there that can help me. Some stores don't have clothing for little people. Except you buy a little girl's dress. Well, what does it look like a 40-year-old woman wearing little girly clothes? Or a 40-year-old man wearing little boy's suits that look like a little boy's suit? Every kingdom, Robert says, divided against itself is brought to desolation. And every city or house divided against itself will not stand. Matthew 12:25. Going on, our community believes that 26 years is more than enough for businesses to be made accessible. The ADA was the signature and lasting domestic policy achieved by President George H.W. Bush, Bush number one. You can extend and add to the Republican legacy of support for disability rights by promising to veto this bill or any bill like it. Mr. President-elect, next Friday will be the President of the United States. We're asking you, if this bill is passed by Congress, that you will veto the bill that will impose additional notice requirements, giving additional time. Quarter of a century, this law has been enacted, and you still trying to get a ramp in there for 26 years? You still trying to get an interpreter for 26 years? You still trying to make things accessible 26 years? I go out in the street sometimes, and there's not even any cut curbs. 26 years, city? 26 years, town? Come on, people. Mark, good afternoon. A dangerous bill that is aimed at eliminating the rights of people with mental health disabilities is likely to return to the House the next Congress. The Helping Families in Mental Health Crisis Act is a bill which treats people with mental health disabilities as human chattel, like cows, horses, human chattel, stripping our constitutionally protected rights to privacy and due process, and imposing coercive involuntary treatment regimens, which are in many cases prison by a different name. Too much bureaucracy, too much accountability, too difficult to get certain equipment and certain things passed and done that will make our lives easier and much more complete. It's like we're trying to deny people with disabilities even the basic rights of decency and humanity. This bill is an insult on the constitutional freedoms which you have said you hold dear, and we call on you, Mr. President-elect, to be our strong ally in opposing this bill or any similar legislation. Finally, stop the torture of disabled Americans. Our Constitution bans the federal government from imposing cruel and unusual punishment on criminal defendants, yet we currently allow private institutions to impose such punishments as on disabled individuals. So we don't want to torture this person. We don't want to torture that person. Some of them enemies of the state, of the nation. But we allow people, decent people, disabled people, citizens of this country, to have to endure in private institutions cruel and unusual punishment. The Judge Rottenberg Center is the only facility in the nation that uses electric shock on disabled people under the veil of therapy, quote unquote. The shock devices used by the Judge Rottenberg Center, I want you to remember these names too, because you need to write to somebody about this. Your senator, your congressman, and certainly president-elect. Well, by the time you write it, it'll be Mr. President. Judge Rottenberg Center are made on site and are made to give shocks that are stronger than that of a police taser for behaviors as insignificant as getting out of a chair without permission. So I'm going to be shocked by a device that is stronger than the strongest police taser because I want to get out of a chair or I want to get back in the chair when ordered to do so. This treatment of disabled Americans, which an FDA panel recommended banning 2 years ago, is inhumane, and unacceptable. You can end this unwarranted torture that the previous administration failed to address by banning the use of electric shocks in the Judge Rottenberg Center. In any center, any hospital. I know there's more than just this group. This is the one that people know about, but I know there's many other hospitals, many other institutions I know. They neglect, and we're not even talking, this is shock treatment, but there's neglect going on, people laying in their feces, people laying in, have bed sores being untreated, people over-medicated, they're in a stupor. I know I was into a home at one point, a rehab center, and they would give me so many painkillers of different sorts that I was out all the time. I wake up just long enough to go back to sleep. Felt I was dying. And I still had my mind about me, my wit about me. I protested. I talked to my wife about it, and she interceded on my behalf. Vehemently. But how many people are there that are seniors and people that are disabled who have no family as their advocate, who have no voice, who can't even speak? Nobody can stand up for their rights. We need to be looking after them. I'm going to tell you the truth, we need to have a board amongst disabled folk and those who are caregivers and family members of disabled folk that monitor some of these institutions. We need to go into some of these institutions ourselves. Not always have people going for us. We need to step up and do that. Why can't we go into a nursing home? 2017 will be a different year for me. I'm going to act a lot on this stuff in my own community of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. One of the largest cities in the nation. I'm going to start doing something. This is me myself. If I got to go with Will and them by myself into these hospitals and these convalescent homes and these other places where people have disabilities and elderly are stationed, I'm going into them. Check it out myself. Because it's about time some of us do something to help ourselves and each other. Always depending on somebody else to do something for us. We need to start doing something ourselves. We need to be seen ourselves. We need to fight for each other ourselves. And for ourselves. Because if I fight for you, by and by it may come down to me, or it may come down to my child. Who's to say what's going to happen? Disability, as we said, we started the whole thing. Disability is a funny thing. Everybody becomes disabled sooner or later. Some sooner than later, through accident, disease, or whatever. But if we live long enough, we're going to have our eyesight not as strong, our legs aren't going to be as strong, our hearing won't be as good, and all the rest of that will begin to falter along the way as we get older. Natural process of life. The moment you're born, even the moment you're in your mother's womb, you're dying. We're dying from the moment we're in our parents' womb. Brain cells can never be revived. They're dead, they stay dead. We're dying, we're born to die. And as you get closer to death, your abilities become lessened the older you get. As a candidate, you boldly establish your own agenda. Cutting through the political rhetoric to speak directly to Americans who have been felt left out and forgotten by the political process. In your victory speech, you pledge to every citizen of our land that you will be a president of all Americans. You promise to bring Americans together as one united people. When you take office, you will have the power to follow through on your promise and forge a new policy that breaks with partisan gridlock and includes every American. You can ensure that Americans with disabilities have the opportunity to realize our fullest potential and no longer be forgotten and disregarded by a political culture war that must end. ADAPT formally request the opportunity to meet with you and key representatives from your transition team and incoming administration so that we can get to work on this immediately. The ADAPT community, our letter, for President-elect Donald John Trump Sr. Rhetoric is over. Promises are over. And really less than a week, because he's inaugurated at 12 noon on next Friday. So by this time, he'll be the President of the United States. Now we're going to put you to the fire. Now we're going to see what you're really all about. A whole lot of speculation, a whole lot of guessing, a whole lot of believing this and believing that about the man. Now we're going to see just what you are all about for real, for real. And as we watch, we're going to be preparing ourselves to act. As we observe, we're going to be preparing ourselves to approach you directly, strongly, not just you, but your administration and other Republicans as well as Democrats that sit in Congress and on the benches of all the judiciary, from the Supreme Court to the District Court to the Common Pleas Court to the Traffic Court, for that matter. We're going to see just where this country is going for real, for real. After 26 years of the ADA and the over forever years as far as America is concerned, we've been here from the beginning. One of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, Stephen Hopkins, had cerebral palsy. We've been here from the beginning, doing things and acting upon things and accomplishing things that have bettered this nation. Now it's time for this nation to return the favor and appreciate and recognize and include in every aspect of this society people with disabilities, whether it be a physical disability, a developmental disability, or a mental disability. Mr. President, our eyes, along with the other eyes of this nation, are upon you. Make the opportunity that you've been given to serve this nation as its 45th president an opportunity that no one will regret and everyone will appreciate. The time is now. And Americans of every stripe, whether you're able-bodied or disabled, let's keep our eyes on the prize and see this what's going to happen to our nation as the days, months, and years unfold. And don't be ashamed of standing up for what you know is right, because only the right will win in the end. Well, dear hearts, we see you Monday. God bless you. Thank you for stopping by. Share this video, share this live program, which will be on tape in a few minutes, with others, so that we can be ready to welcome in another day in the life of America. Still the greatest nation in the world. Have a great weekend. Happy Martin Luther King Day on Monday, observing his birthday. And I admonish you to remember his life. Don't just be about the tax. You're not going to work. You're not doing this. You're not going to school. Get a book. Go to a meeting. There's going to be breakfasts and lunches that honor the man. If you can't get out, read something about him. Go on TV. Most of the time, there's something on one of the stations that talk about the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Learn about the man. And then learn about what he was like as the leading civil rights leader of the 1950s and 60s. He shook up things. He made a difference. He did not allow the status quo to keep on quoing. He challenged them. And he put them to the fire, and he put them to the test. And he demanded that justice and equality be given to his people. Men like him and Malcolm X and others made a difference. And we here in the 21st century have an opportunity to make a difference as well. Well, God bless you. See you real soon. See you Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I thank you, Lisa, for reminding us of that. You can go to my YouTube page for all of these programs. YouTube, you just type in G. William Scott. It'll take you to all my programs, even those that are not on Facebook but are on YouTube. All of them will be on there. I'm going to post another one today about some other things that we're going to be talking about. So go to my YouTube page as well. You can browse it. You can copy it. You can share it on YouTube, on Facebook, wherever your social media is. You can share with others as you go along the way. God bless you, and be clear of one thing. We're in this thing together. No matter where we go, we're going to always be in this thing together.